Hey traders, welcome back to another daily profit and loss recap video. Today is Monday, July 17th. I just finished up trading for the day. It was a tricky morning, but I was able to lock in $1,452 in profits. I had 3 winning trades, so in this video we're going to break down all of these trades, talk about my thought process behind them, so that hopefully you can learn something from my trading and apply it to your own. Let's not waste any time. Let's get into the first trade for me. This was actually time-wise the last trade that I took today, but in terms of alphabetical order, the first trade for me today was with the stock ABOS. ABOS was a big gap up this morning in pre-market. As we can see at 8 o'clock this morning, it spikes all the way up to $14 per share, starts to fade down into the open, and pretty much right away at the market open, it starts to sell off and kind of just fade down for most of the morning. If we look at the 1-minute chart, we can see pretty clearly that there is just continually lower lows and lower highs. It's in a downtrend. And finally, at about 10:45, 11 o'clock this morning, we can see it starts to break out of that downtrend just a bit. If we were to connect these highs here to see this downtrend, we could see for the most part all morning it's kind of following that trend. So earlier in the Market Master group, I posted that I was patiently waiting for a higher low to form for ABOS on the 5-minute chart for a quick bounce to scalp. At the time, it was trading at $9.56. And it was just kind of going lower and lower and lower. And the analogy in buying these types of setups is kind of like catching a falling knife. This is not something that I came up with on my own. I've heard people talk about this for years. But obviously, if you're trying to catch a knife that's falling, you're most likely going to get cut. The same kind of concept applies to trying to buy into a stock that is continually falling and continually making new lows. So instead of doing that, you want to wait for it to start breaking out of a downtrend. You want to wait for it to start forming some higher lows, and that's going to be a signal that the stock is finally ready to bounce, and now is a good time to buy into the stock. So all of that being said, I waited for it to finally form that higher low on the 5-minute chart. That happened right at about 11:20 this morning. We can see that is where the first higher low finally forms, and I buy into it then as it's starting to pull back a bit. I had a total of 500 shares. My average cost was about $9.92. So it was a relatively small position, but I knew that if I was buying up here in the 990s, realistically, I kind of had to risk all the way down to, the 940 area, even closer to the low of day. So I didn't want to build into too large of a position right away. I wanted to just take that starter position, let it kind of move in my favor, and then potentially add more shares into it down the road. But I never ended up adding into it. It started to kind of just trade sideways a bit, climb a little bit higher, and finally we get this nice pop up into the VWAP where I locked in my profits on this trade, and I ended up with $283 in profits on that trade. So nothing crazy obviously, but it was a nice little scalp, just using some basic technical analysis and waiting for the stock to finally break out of that downtrend that it was in all the way from the pre-market session. Very quickly, before moving on to the second trade, as I mentioned, this trade with ABOS was talked about in the Market Master group. So if you're interested in seeing my commentary about the stocks that I'm trading or about the stocks that I'm watching for a potential trade, make sure to come join us in the Market Master group. There's going to be a link down below in the description for you to get signed up. Okay, but with that being said, the second trade for me today was with the stock ACAD. This was in the Market Master group's trade plans over the weekend for a continuation. Because on Friday, this was a nice gap and go with news. It closed up near the high of day, and it was set up really nicely for a potential continuation today on Monday. So if we take a look at the price action this morning, we can see it kind of opens very close to the previous day's closing price. And right at the market open, we get this pullback down to the 32 area. It starts to bounce back up and go red to green for the day. In other words, it starts to break above that previous day's closing price once again. And a lot of times when I'm looking for a continuation from a stock that had a nice move the previous day, I'm waiting for exactly that to happen. I'm waiting for it to have a morning pullback and then start to go red to green again for the day. That to me is often a very good buy signal in these setups. And because of that, that is where I ended up taking a position here in ACAD. I was definitely a little bit late to the red to green move. I bought in the 3240s. But I ended up having a nice little scalp on this trade as it pushed up to the previous day's high, which was $32.89. We can see that area does start to turn into a bit of resistance here this morning. So I ended up locking in most of my profits up into that area. But once it started to reject that area and start to pull back towards the VWAP, I ended up just selling the rest of my shares and I had a very small profit on that trade of just $117. Okay, so the final of my 3 trades today was with the stock BBIO. BBIO, just like ABOS, was a nice gap up this morning in pre-market. We can see it has a very similar move. ABOS had that big spike up to 14 at 8 o'clock this morning, and BBIO right at 7 o'clock this morning has this big spike up into the 30s, and then it starts to fade back down into the market open once that first 5 minutes of price action forms, and the opening range breakout level in this case is going to be the high of $27.84. So to kind of give you a visualizer here, that is going to be our opening range breakout level. We can see it pushes straight through that, pulls back, turns that level into support, and starts to climb higher and higher above the VWAP. So once we got that opening range breakout, what I was looking for was the VWAP area to turn into a bit of support. It pulled a bit below the VWAP, but it did end up holding the breakout level as support in that case. So I took a starter position of 500 shares into the VWAP during this pullback. I missed out on locking in profits into this initial move that happened just about a minute later, but we see that it pulled back once again to the same level, bounced off of it as support, and once it started to pick back up above VWAP once again, I added a few hundred more shares into my position. So I ended up with a total of 700 shares. My average cost was right at about the VWAP, and I locked in a portion of my profits as it pushed back up into that previous high. And then I was a little bit more patient with the remaining shares that I held onto. I let them run up to the $31 area, and once it started to have that rejection up here from this high volume spike, I locked in the rest of my profits. And the reason for that is because we zoom out a bit, we can see that $31 area is a pretty significant level all throughout the pre-market session. There are quite a few times here where it rejects that level in pre-market. So even though I had some profits already locked in, I didn't want to risk watching the rest of my profits disappear from holding on to my remaining shares for too long. So at the end of the day, I ended up with $1,052 in profits on that trade alone, which brought my overall profits for the day up to $1,452. As you can see, I definitely locked in profits a bit early on this trade in hindsight. But again, it did start to reject that $31 area, so if anything, I realistically should have just been paying a bit more attention to it once it started to consolidate here and hold above the VWAP. Definitely could have looked to have bought back into this trade and make some more money on this second run that happened later in the morning, but all in all, it was a solid morning of trading. Hopefully you found some value in this video, and if you did, please make sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. And again, if you want to hear about all of these stocks that I'm trading in real time, as well as work with our team of trader, get access to the day trade and swing trade alerts, our detailed trade plans, our live custom scanner streams, and so on and so forth. All of that can be found in the Market Master group, and there's going to be a link down below in the description for you to get signed up. Anyway, thank you again for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and good luck with your trading.